Hi everybody, my name's Sarah Wu and I'm coming to you from Costa Rica in San Mateo, Alajuela at about 1,500 feet in the mountains of Turubari. And I'm going to be talking to you in this next unit about working with volunteers and mentorship. And so in this unit in particular, what you're going to find throughout your handouts and in these next few video segments is that you're going to learn how to create a volunteer program, specifically how to create your application, your student profile, setting your intentions, your orientation, and also how to manage volunteers and how to work with different personalities and really reflect for yourself what it means to work with volunteers. But let's think about volunteers from a meta perspective for a second and kind of do some broad sweeps about what working with volunteers is like, and even just what are volunteers. When we think about volunteers in nature, we can go back, zoom out a little bit and look at, the different webs, that all life resides upon. And so volunteers reside on a specific web. They fill a specific niche, and a niche is just time, space, and function, right? If we're going to look at a plant species, if we're going to look at an animal species, a bacteria, a fungi, or a volunteer. And a volunteer is a kind of non-specific term, much like the term weed. And a weed is a volunteer. So a volunteer could refer to a human being, it could be an animal, it could be a plant, and when thinking about the volunteer in particular, we're going to talk about the weeds and the pioneer species, and how do these plants in particular, how do they work in the ecosystem and what role do they fill? And so in the ecosystem, something like the weeds or the volunteers or the pioneer species are the ones that come in the early succession of the forest, in the early succession of the prairie or in the field, and they're the ones that help to they bring minerals, they bring nutrients, they bring, this kind of rapid growth and rapid decay and add biomass to the ecosystem. And so that's much like what our volunteers do at our projects, is they bring in fresh ideas, they bring in different experiences and new perspectives, and they usually come in kind of fast and then they stay for a limited period of time, and then there's still like a resonance of them after they leave, whether it's the project that they completed, it's the friendships that they made, it's the impact that they made on your project. And so that's how we can view volunteers, in relation to the ecosystem and human volunteers within our project. And so it's interesting because when we even think about like the pioneers, the volunteers, the weeds in the ecosystem, what are they when they're in balance and out of balance? When they're in balance, there's a broad biodiversity, they're filling many different niches. When they're out of balance, often what we'll find with weeds or with the volunteers, we could call those kinds of plants, is we're going to see invasive species. And it really just means that there's something in the system that's out of balance. And so when a volunteer, a human volunteer in the project is in balance, there's diversity, there's friendship, there's a lot of great work getting done, the community is really blossoming and thriving. And when the community or the project are out of balance in relation to the volunteers, maybe it's when you're getting dramas, or someone's not pulling their load, or they're bringing negativity, or they're just taking more than they're giving back. And so what's happening with that reciprocal relationship is that there's one kind of vampiring off the other, one again taking more than they're giving. And so it's important to think about like what niche do the volunteers, your human volunteers in your project fulfill, and reflect on the natural ecosystem. So in your project, maybe your volunteer is working with the compost, maybe they're worker bees and they're the ones out there, in your garden beds, or they're harvesters, or they're working in the kitchen processing, or maybe they're helping you with marketing, maybe they're helping you, in childcare. And so your volunteers fill many different niches. And so what's really important as you're going through this process, especially through your written material, that has your worksheets, which has all of the information about creating the application, setting your intention, creating timelines, really thinking about like what are the niches that aren't being filled in my project, and what needs to be filled, and what kind of people am I seeking, and for how long do I want to seek them. And so it's really thinking about, like what are the mutually beneficial relationships that I want to create, and what are what are you going to receive, and also what are you going to give? Because there is a reciprocal exchange happening between you and your volunteers, and that's really, really important. And I think what happens so often is that in projects, when people are working with volunteers, frustrations can come up quite easily because you're not sure what the volunteer is supposed to be doing, or how you're supposed to manage them, or how much time are they taking from you, and how much time can you actually give them. And so there's a lot of personal reflection that needs to happen in creating a volunteer program, because they're not just there and they're not just to start working and they're going to jump right into the project. They're really going to need you as the mentor. And so as you're creating, you know, your volunteer program, you also have to reflect so much on like, what can you offer as the mentor to your volunteers. And so again, the next segments, we're going to go into voluntourism a little bit. We're going to talk about micromanaging and trust. We're going to talk about how to accept feedback and feedback loops, both from you to the volunteers and from the volunteers to yourself. Yeah, so specifically our next video segment is going to be with our friend Geneva Cifuentes His, who works with volunteer programs all over the globe, but currently based here in Costa Rica. So stay tuned.